President Kumaratunga had been advocating peace well before she got into power, and when she came into power she did try to establish some agreement with the LTTE.
We requested the government of Sri Lanka to lift the economic embargo on our people and to address their urgent humanitarian problems. But the Sri Lanka government insisted that they should start talks on the core issues, on the fundamental problems of the ethnic question. So there was differences of opinion.
We tried to talk with Tigers for 8 months. There was a truce and we were talking with them. We lifted all the economic blockades which were put in by the last government, and they are still lifted. And they broke the truce and started fighting again for no known reason yet.
The war now resumed more intensely than ever. In 1995, government troops occupied the Tiger stronghold Jaffna. President Kumaratunga hoped military success would force the rebels back to the negotiating table, this time on her terms. Victory appeared to be in sight.
I request every citizen to celebrate our victories calmly and peacefully. The war effort was not or never will be against the Tamil civilians, but against a ruthless group of terrorists who do not want peace. We must in no way harass the Tamil community by word or by deed.
Tens of thousands of Tamils were ordered to leave the Jaffna Peninsula by the retreating Tigers. Many died in the fighting. Tamil refugees inside Sri Lanka now numbered well over 500,000. The Tigers struck back. One of the worst attacks, the bombing of the central bank in Colombo. 91 people died. Outgunned on the battlefield, the Tigers resorted to guerrilla warfare and suicide attacks. Like her mother, President Kumaratunga was also targeted. She survived, but lost an eye. The Tigers also struck at the economy. An attack on Colombo Airport destroyed half the country's airline fleet. Tourism slumped. The government was finally ready to talk again. So were the Tigers. Heavy casualties meant they were running out of recruits. Outside forces once more played a crucial role. In the aftershock of 9/11, Britain and America finally labelled the LTTE a terrorist organisation.
I think what led the LTT into accepting that they need to negotiate was 9/11 and the subsequent war on terror. And they felt that if this war of terror was extended, that they would themselves be caught up in it.
Long isolated from the outside world, the Tigers now realised they had to emerge from their hideouts. The rebel leader, Prabhakaran, gave an unprecedented media conference in the middle of the jungle. It was, he said, time for serious negotiations.
We have impressed upon the international community that we are seriously and sincerely committed to peace, and we were prepared to negotiate with the government to arrive at a political settlement.
At the first talks in 7 years, the Tigers dropped their demand for a separate state. A historic handshake. Agreement in principle on a federal state. Power sharing between Sinhalese and Tamils. Two years later, the ceasefire still holds, but the talks are suspended. Intense political rivalries in Colombo have undermined the peace process. Having called fresh elections, the President strengthened her position by forging an alliance with none other than the JVP. Still vociferously anti-Tamil, the Maoists have renounced violence and are trying out a new tactic instead: power through the ballot box. The election result gave President Kumaratunga the chance to pick the Prime Minister she wanted. But for the peace process, the outcome looked ominous.
Because of the election results, Sri Lanka is in for a very uncertain time, because without a party with a clear majority in Parliament, it's very difficult to push forward any reforms. The JVP are quite critical of the LTT demands for federalisation or any sort of more forms of devolution. So because of that, recently the LTT has withdrawn again from the peace process because it sees that the main party in power itself is not clear about what stand it should take in the peace process.
Several months have gone by since the elections. The Tigers say they won't resume talks until the government changes the agenda.
LTT's position is that the talks must go stage by stage, and the first stage should be to address the urgent humanitarian needs of the people. So we want the interim government proposal followed by talks on a permanent settlement.
In regard to the interim administration, their proposals, if you look at them, they have the trappings of a state, and no responsible Sri Lankan government can possibly accede to those proposals. But in fairness to Sri Lankan government, I must say that the President has been prepared to look upon them as their maximalist approach and to discuss them as a precursor to the main settlement itself.
A couple of weeks ago, another ominous development. 8 Tamil men shot dead in the suburbs of Colombo, members of a breakaway faction of the rebels. The Tigers accuse the government of encouraging the split in rebel ranks. For now, the ceasefire is holding, just an achievement in itself after the loss of 65,000 lives. But with talks suspended indefinitely, the threat of a return to war hangs heavily over the people of Sri Lanka.
Ordinary people in Sri Lanka are principally victims of this whole nasty process. Their sons and daughters have been killed in combat and in terrorist incidents in some cases. The economy has been more or less wrecked. A very promising economy has been wrecked by the need for defense expenditure by the government and the need on the Tiger side to appropriate resources to wage the conflict. The election results clearly demonstrate a preference for an end to this, for an accommodation, for a negotiated settlement of some description on both sides. So I think the majority of the people of Sri Lanka have a reasonably constructive attitude towards this, but they are all trapped in this unpleasant mess.
Sri Lanka needs peace. Sri Lanka wants peace. Both the Tigers and the government accept a military solution is impossible. Any negotiations are bound to be fraught with difficulties. But unless the island's political leaders can put aside their prejudices and their power struggles, they run the risk of condemning their people to a conflict without end.
Next week, Hotspots is